Hello, in today's programme I'll be taking the lid off the machine they're all talking about, Commodore's new micro, the Amiga.
And we'll be asking, how many telephone numbers can you store in a small lump of mud from a swamp in America?
And our American reporter Freff tries out a database for bargain hunters.
But first, news of a chance to win a visit to Florida, to Walt Disney's Epcot Center, a technically stunning theme park where you can take a ride into the high-tech future and also into the high-risk past. In this primeval swamp, the dinosaurs are robot figures controlled by computers. A trip for two to Epcot is the first prize in a competition sponsored by the Sperry Corporation, whose computers control everything that goes on at Epcot. It's been run by the Association of Young Computer Enthusiasts, AYCE. ACE is a branch of the British Computer Society for serious users of computers under the age of 19. The two runners-up will each receive a Sperry personal computer. To enter the competition, you must be a member of ACE. Members get regular magazines, special prizes for hardware and software, exhibitions, camps and conferences, and access to professional advice. So for more information, write to AYCE, PO Box 1B, London W1 1BE. And now for those of you who haven't yet met a wimp, here's Fred.
Thank you, Mac. Yes. WIMP actually is an easy way of using a computer without typing in all the usual codes and incantations. In fact, for a lot of uses, you can forget about the keyboard altogether. WIMP, W-I-M-P, stands for Windows, Icons, Mouse and Pull-Down Menu. Right, well, what's all that about? This is the mouse. It's a rollerball device, as you can see. As I move it around on the desktop, I'm also moving this arrow around on the screen. Right, that's the mouse. Now pull-down menus. A few of those up here. There's one, another, and a third. Now this is another alternative to typing in. So for example, if I want to enter the word redraw, instead of keying it in, I simply point to it and select. Windows are these things here, the boxes on the screen. Now you can think of those as sheets of paper on a desk. Using the mouse, I can swap them over. I can move them about. Let's put that one in the front again. Move it down. And I can even change the size if I want to. And icons are these images here, these symbols, which represent the programs you might want to select. So let's load up the demos file. Right, I move the mouse to it and press a button, and straight away up comes another window and some more icons, each of which is a program that I might run. Well, firstly, I'll kill off this window here and tidy up the screen a bit. Get a shot of that. Move this to the top. Now, ready to load something up. I'll try this program here, which is called Lines. Once again, move to it, click the button, and up it comes. This is a graphics demonstration, so it really needs to be big. So simplicity itself to move to the top, stretch the window, and there it is. And that gives you some idea of what the WIMP philosophy offers. But so far, this hasn't done anything that you might not have seen on other machines. This, though, is the new Commodore Amiga, and it can do a lot more than the micros you may be used to. And to show that, well, let's try another demonstration here, this boxes demo. There, I'll stretch that one again, move it to the top, make it a bit bigger. Now, you'll notice that the Lines program carries on running. And in fact, all the time I've been speaking, down here, hiding away, is yet another program. This is another nice facility, being able to bring this screen on. So you see, we've got 3 programs going there. This, you see, is a multitasking machine. Each of these programs gets a share of the computer's time. The computer switches from the lines program to the boxes program to the triangles program thousands of times every second. Well, of course, the more programs you run, the slower each one gets. Look how jerkily that triangles program is moving. But if I remove some of these others here, kill that off, kill that and that, watch what happens to the speed. Those triangles are drawing much quicker now. It's got the processor all to itself so the program can run faster. Well, you may be wondering how the Amiga gets this sort of speed. In fact, it's got a 32-bit microprocessor, and that means it works on chunks of data 4 times the size of conventional 8-bit machines, and it uses modern chips which are faster anyway. Here's the motherboard from inside, and this is the 32-bit microprocessor. The smart design doesn't stop there, though. Here are some custom chips, specially designed chips. These two here handle the graphics and the animation, and this one handles just the sound. So the processor doesn't have to do all the thinking for the machine. It can delegate certain specialist tasks while it gets on with other things. And there's another advantage that comes from using these custom chips. They can pack a lot of functions into a single integrated circuit. And the result is a computer with very few components, which is cheaper to make and more difficult to copy. Now, the graphics chip will generate over 4,000 colors on screen at the same time, as you can see here. Although in normal use, you'll have to make do with just 32, I'm afraid. But you can get some pretty snazzy animation, as we've set up over here. This they call Robo City. Now, if you wanted a complicated animation like this on a conventional micro, firstly, you'd have to compromise on the colors. But you'd also have to get the software to manipulate those characters, remembering, say, that the old man here moves behind the fire hydrant, but in front of the female robot, and so on. The Amiga has dedicated hardware, those custom chips, to look after the drawing and the redrawing, replacing the background and so on. Right, well, much as I like that demo, I'll pull that one down and move on to the sound, because sound is normally the forgotten feature of a micro. Traditional sound chips give you a rather crude quality. But with custom-built chips, you can get quality like this. I find that pretty stunning. That is actually stereo sound, and it's a sign of how seriously they take the sound facilities of this machine, that you can get more sounds by loading in directly the digitized sound files from the Fairlight, one of the most sophisticated of the professional computer musical instruments. If you don't fancy the old strings touch, what about this one? Heavy, man. It's also got text-to-speech facility, which you may remember we demonstrated in our review of speech chips in Program 1. Well, all this is fine, but what's it going to be used for? Well, multitasking has real uses. You can leave the machine to get on with, say, printing a long document at the same time as word processing and while the computer's sorting out some records on your database. But there does seem to be some confusion as to who this machine is aimed at. In the States, it's marketed as a home micro at about $1,500. Well, bigger disposable incomes, of course, over there. But in the UK, they're planning to launch it as a small business machine, which perhaps means that some of the facilities, such as this, are just not going to be used. Of course, any machine lives or dies by its software. There is an IBM emulation package for the Amiga, giving business users access to at least the top 25 IBM PC programs. But it takes time for software houses to learn the tricks of a new machine. In the meantime, you might make do with something like this. It's a graphics package which I'm not going to attempt to work myself. It's being worked live from upstairs in the gallery. It'll move about images, it'll distort them, it'll do anything you want it to do virtually, and it gives facilities which you would normally get only on dedicated graphics systems. No wonder it got a standing ovation at the Writers' Conference this week.
Sinclair Research says it's close to raising £5 million from a group of venture capitalists to finance a company to develop revolutionary superchip, thousands of times more powerful than chips available today. Sir Clive Sinclair says the deal will be finalised before Christmas. The technology that Sinclair Research hopes to commercialise is called wafer-scale integration and was pioneered 15 years ago by inventor Ivor Catt. Mr. Catt filed his patents in the early 70s, but failed to convince major companies to invest in them. In desperation, he answered a job in an ad in a Sunday newspaper for Sinclair's Cambridge-based think tank, the MetaLab. Using conventional techniques, hundreds of chips are made on a 4-inch wafer of silicon. The new process creates just one superchip on the wafer. Well, the long-awaited lap-side portable version of the IBM personal computer, codenamed Clamshell, is due to be launched in the US in January. The machine, which only weighs 11 pounds, has been expected for at least 2 years, but predicted specification is disappointing. Industry pundits were expecting a plasma display like the one shown on the IBM PC at Comdex in Las Vegas last month. Instead, IBM is set to have plumped for the notoriously hard-to-read LCD screen commonly used on lap-size machines. It will use 3.5-inch discs. Acorn has announced that they are negotiating with Olivetti in Italy and Thomson in France on a European educational computer standard. Agreement is expected early next year. Acorn's managing director, Brian Long, flies to Italy on Monday for talks with Olivetti and Thomson. It's expected the new standard will be based on 32-bit technology. When asked by MicroLive whether the new standard will be compatible with the present BBC Micros, all Brian Long would say is that compatibility is Acorn's strongest intent. Well, finally, the latest space shuttle flight was hit by a large computer bug. An 18-inch monitor-type lizard crawled onto a transformer and brought the Senegal tracking station to a halt. It was dislodged with a screwdriver and was last seen scuttling off into the desert.
Well, it obviously wanted to be a computer monitor. Right, thank you, Mac. Now, how do you find out what an unknown painting is worth? The best way is to compare prices for similar works by the same artist. Well, our American reporter Freff has been out to Long Island near New York to try out a new micro-based service for bargain hunters.
Everyone who has ever wandered into an antique shop dreams of finding treasure. The bargain buy that's worth maybe thousands of dollars. If you find something which somehow looks a little special, how can you be sure before parting with all that cash? The answer is merely a phone call away.
Pardon me, do you have a phone that I could use?
Yes, it's out front on the table.
Good afternoon, Teleappraisal.
Hi, I've got a picture I'd like to have a little help identifying.
Okay, fine. Have you used the service before? I'm afraid not. Okay, then all we really need would be a brief description of the painting that you have there.
Let's see, there's a woman in a blue and red dress. She's next to a creek. It's landscape, maybe 6 inches by 9 inches. She's reading a book.
Then let me put you on hold 1 second. I'll get over to the terminal and we'll see what we can make out of the signature. Be back in 1 sec. Okay, then. What can you make out of the signature?
Well, there is one, but it's difficult to read. Seems to say V period onperf.
Okay, so it's initial V. And how would you spell onperf?
Well, O-N-P-E-R-F, onperf.
Certainly is unusual, but let's just take a look here and see if anything comes up under that. No, doesn't seem to be, but we can run what we call a vowel search, which sort of replaces the vowels in the name with others of the possible ones and then checks the permutations. See if anything comes up there. No. So then we have another search we can try, whereby we put in the initials and then maybe a date or so, and then it checks against the various 70,000 we have in the computer and sees if any of them matches up on it. So you say it would be an initial V, but might there not be something else there, or before it or after it? Because it's a lot easier if we have 3 initials.
Just a second. Down near the It's tattered here at the edge, and there seems to be another letter. It's an R. RVO.
Okay, so let's run it through on that. First initial R, and then we have the V. And do you know perhaps when the work was painted, or?
Well, there's nothing on the front. Let me check. Well, the framers sealed the back of it with a calendar from 1826. Nice to know it's at least that old.
Oh, excellent. Let's run that through. No, that still hasn't turned up a possibility.
Well, I'm sorry you couldn't help me any more than that, but thank you very much for your time.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, there is a possibility, because frequently, say with Dutch names or Flemish names or such, the V can be abbreviation for van. So let's just work on the possibility that it's R van something. So first initial R, the van would not show up as part of the name. And that date, 1826, Framer could have done that really any time after the work was painted. It's not necessarily contemporary to the piece. Let's leave off a year this time round. Okay, it's pulling up the possibilities. Okay, looks like we've got quite a few possibilities here. 17.
Oh, you found some. Good.
Yeah, maybe we can work something out here. Okay, I'm taking a look through. So we're looking really for someone with a van. There's a Rudolf von Ottenfeld. That seems too long for what you were describing. Here's something. Richard Van Orley. O-R-L-E-Y.
O-R... Orley it is. Not on perf. Orley. Terrible handwriting.
Excellent. I'll tell you what. Let's pull up his works and see what we have here.
It looks like on perf, but it says Orley.
Okay, we have 5 sales of his works in recent years. Here's one. This one's a gouache, 8 by 6 inches, and that's sold at Sotheby's, London, December 11th of 80, entitled The Christ and the Woman of Samaria, and brought $1,290.
You mean that this might be worth $1,200?
Yeah, that's what you're looking at, and this one here was signed by the artist like yours and considered authentic. That was back in 1980, so if it was $1,290 back then, you could probably count on a bit more today.
This is wonderful.
Oh, great. I'm really glad we're able to finally zero in on it. It seemed bleak for a minute there.
This is fantastic. Have you done this for other folks?
Yeah. Sometimes people call up with things they really have no idea what the value might be. And sometimes we get corporations. For example, insurance companies are frequently beset with claims. People come to them and say, oh, look, my Marie Laurencin watercolor is sold for, been lost, and I'm missing $50,000 I want for it. And then the insurance company comes to us, and we tell them, well, look, here's a printout. Shows that no other watercolor like theirs has ever sold for more than $4,000. And they just come back and show it to the claimant, and generally the claimant backs down.
Well, look, I'm very thankful to you.
So again, it seems the figures have really come into great help in people's case.
Listen, thanks a lot. I'm very grateful, but I've got to go right now. There's some business I must transact.
Bye-bye. Hello, wait, please, can you, we need the American Express card number.
Well, what Freff didn't know was that it actually was an on-perf and worth about 50 cents. Well, the one thing which made mass computing possible is the development of ever cheaper memory. Over the past 15 years, the cost of computer memory has halved each year. In order to demonstrate the development of memory, we're going to take as a reference a page from a telephone directory. This marked area has about 1,000 characters. That's about 1K of computer memory. Well, one of today's typical home micros would have about 64K of internal memory, so you could store about 5 pages of a telephone directory. And the average floppy disk stores about 300K, so that's about 30 pages.
In the early days of computing, things were far from easy. The processor and the memory it could deal with at any one moment consisted of hot thermionic valves, which acted as electronic switches. If one failed, the program crashed. Turn the machine off and all the data disappeared. Ever since computers were invented, everything they do has been based on the ability to store bits of information using those electronic switches. It took 2 of these valves to store just 1 bit of information. As 8 bits make up 1 byte or 1 character, 16 valves were needed to store it. To hold a stream of bits while they were being processed and so cut down on the number of valves, early machines used things called delay lines, either mercury columns or, as here, coils of wire into which sound or stress waves were sent. A bit would be sent in at one end at the speed of sound and be read at the other if it was needed. If not, it was fed in to go round again. Another invention which helped the machine store information as it worked was the magnetic drum. It spun round and, rather like a disk drive, information could be recorded on its surface and read back by these heads. This one can hold just 4 kilobytes of information. Using this kind of working memory, commercial computers appeared in the mid-50s.
One of the earliest business computers in Britain was Leo, the Lions Electronic Office, used in the mid-1950s by Lions tea shops and other organisations like the Ford Motor Company to do their payrolls. It was the beginning of the mass use of the computer for data processing, without which big business today simply couldn't operate. This first-generation machine had thousands of hot valves, many of which had to be changed as they burnt out.
For an hour a day, Leo belongs to its engineers for maintenance and testing. The voltage, normally kept to the operating figure, is made to fluctuate. Any valve or other component which can operate in such conditions is certainly fit for another 24 hours useful life. And if it cannot, then now is the chance to change it.
Information about salaries, for example, was fed into the computer using punched cards. Preparing these cards was one of the most appalling jobs ever invented, and now happily just about gone. And information could be saved on the external or backing store, generally punched paper tape, for feeding into the machine again. Both the program and the data was fed in from these cards or tape.
A new form of memory device for the inside of the machine came along in the 50s, core memory, tiny magnetic rings threaded by wires. In this picture, you can see the construction. Each magnetic core is capable of storing 1 bit, depending on whether it's magnetized one way or the other. Its drawback was that in reading the memory, you had to change the way that individual cores were magnetized. This destroyed the data, and so it had to be reset. Core memory, though, was fast and reliable. And incidentally, it was non-volatile. Switch the machine off and the data was still there. Because they're so reliable, they're still being used here in the studios at Television Centre to store information about the lighting. Stacks of these cores made up something like this, the 1960s equivalent of the 16K RAM, or about 1.5 pages of our phone book.
Well, the valve had got a bit smaller, but it was still unreliable. Fortunately, in the 1960s, the transistor took over, but it still took 2 of these to store 1 bit of information. So computers were still large, though they were more reliable and made use of the new printed circuit boards.
From this complex neatness stems a computer of the 2nd generation, which offers forward-thinking organizations a comprehensive data processing system at low cost. Here then is the 1301, with fast data handling based on a megacycle pulse rate, large internal storage capacity based on immediate access core stores and drum backing stores, comprehensive magnetic tape facilities with full error detection are available, and there is a choice between 2 magnetic tape systems. A high-speed 1-inch magnetic tape system working at 90,000 digits per second, or a standard system on half-inch tape working at 22,500 digits per second.
That sounded like an early Richard Baker to me. Well, in the early 60s, the significant development was the integrated circuit. Thousands of transistors and other components, now microscopic in size, could be put on the surface of a single piece of silicon. Magnified, it looks like this. You can see the thousands of components. And with high enough magnification, we can see a single transistor. Since the early 70s, every year the capacity of chips has doubled and the cost halved. Today we have a single memory chip like this which holds 2 million bits, or about 25 pages of our directory.
And backing store has developed from tape to disk. Each of these hard disks can hold at least 10 megabytes. A megabyte is 1 million characters, so 10 megabytes is just about 1 telephone directory. Some disks, of course, can hold up to 5,000 megabytes. Recently announced is this compact disc memory, which works on a modified form of the domestic compact disc player. But you can only read from this form of memory, not record. However, the latest backing store is this 12-inch double-sided Laserdisc, on which you can both read and record. At the moment, though, you can't record over existing data. This holds 2 gigabytes. That's 2,000 million bytes. Or, if you like, 200 directories. The trouble is, it's still very slow in the computer's terms because it still depends on a mechanical system to find the data and transfer it to the main computer memory. Many of tomorrow's computer tasks, like speech recognition and so on, are going to need much faster processing with enormous amounts of memory which can be accessed directly. So the search is on for fast memory which can do justice to those super processors. Freff's been to see a new development which could make today's memory devices look pretty tame.
At the Mellon Institute in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, work is going on to develop new solid-state devices to store information. Although it's still in the research stage, IBM is now funding the project. Leading the team is Professor Robert Burge. This is a memory storage device, but how much does it store?
This device will store up to 100 gigabytes of memory, which is approximately 100,000 times more than the average disk memory device can store. And it can store it on a very small piece, roughly 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, which allows for very high densities as well as very high speeds of memory access.
It's not exactly ready for the home market yet, is it?
Unfortunately not. We probably have at least 5 more years of development work to do, and there are a number of problems with it right now. For example, it has to work at 77 degrees above absolute zero, which is at liquid nitrogen temperatures, and that's not easily obtained in the home. And furthermore, it requires very expensive lasers to operate, 2 lasers in fact, and each of these lasers and present technology costs about $100,000.
The system uses a naturally occurring protein molecule called bacteriorhodopsin. It's found in the salt marshes of San Francisco. The molecule can exist in 2 forms, and these 2 forms can be used to store the digital information. So let's call them 0 and 1. State 0 can be flipped into state 1 by absorbing light from a green laser beam, and a red laser beam converts state 1 back into state 0. The green laser pulses on and off as it sends a stream of digital bits to the chip. In this way, it writes on the surface of the chip by flipping some of the molecules from state 0 to state 1. Reading the information back is more complicated. The same laser is then used to read the bits, and the way it does it is this. It scans the surface. Where it finds state 1 molecules, the laser beam travels right through the rhodopsin unchanged. But when it comes across a state 0 molecule, it flips it to state 1. As a result, some energy is absorbed, and the change in brightness of the beam is measured by a sensor behind the chip. However, in being detected, the bit has also been destroyed. So it's now the job of the red laser to reset the type 1 molecules to type 0 so that the chip is returned to its original state. It's rather like the way that old core memory stores worked, only much, much faster. Is it a fair thing to say that these technologies you're experimenting with here are the real future of electronics, not the semiconductor technologies we're all familiar with?
I believe in most cases it is, because these devices, because they're so small, can operate at speeds 10 to 100 times faster than semiconductors and in much smaller operating environments. And therefore, as computers become faster and faster, eventually we'll have to outgrow semiconductors and replace them with molecular devices because of their speed.
So, on 1 square centimetre of mud from the salt marshes of San Francisco, one day we may be able to store enough information to fill 10,000 phone books, more than enough to hold the name and telephone number of everyone on Earth. Maybe you won't be able to need this information on your home micro, but for business, government, and particularly military computers, it's going to be essential.
Well, that's it for this week. Join us next Friday for the first Christmas show on the BBC, when we'll be suggesting good presents for computer buffs and looking at the results of our £8,000 data encryption competition. Good night.